Thank you, Madam Vice President. Thank you for hosting us. And more importantly, thanks for elevating this issue. As the Vice President mentioned, today Treasury is awarding $1.25 billion to 863 community development financial institutions across the country. These CDFIs include banks, credit unions, and loan funds, which play a very important role in our financial services ecosystem. They serve people in places the sector hasn't traditionally served well. About 20% of CDFIs are headquartered in what are termed persistent poverty counties. About 40% are headquartered in majority-minority areas, namely communities of color, where they make loans to help people start businesses or buy homes. The Vice President is right. This is one of the first subjects she raised with me, the importance of CDFIs, and it's exactly the right place to focus our attention. Because these questions, who can access credit and capital and who can't, those questions are at the root of many long-term structural problems in our economy. For most of the 20th century, our economy was undergoing a convergence. There were richer areas of the country and poorer areas. But the poorer areas were catching up with the richer ones. The country was rising together. But today, that's less true. There's a divergence among local economies. And one of the trends we see is that some places don't have access to much capital, while others have an abundance. In fact, some forms of investment are heavily concentrated within just a handful of cities. Last year, for instance, 71% of all venture funding went to just 4 metropolitan areas. The disparity in who can access capital and where also falls along racial lines. About 16% of America's population lives in areas that are majority-minority areas. But that 16% of the population only receives about 9% of investment from mainstream financial institutions. And that's part of the reason the racial wealth gap persists. When I started studying economics in 1963, the average black family owned 15% of what the average white family owned. And that number hasn't changed in half a century. It's as close to a constant as we come in economic data. And this is a very unjust aspect of our economy. The Vice President made that very clear. But I would also add, it's a very unhealthy aspect of our economy. If you were designing a well-functioning American economy, you wouldn't have 70% of capital in any form flowing to just 4 cities, because that's not where 70% of the opportunity is. We as a country are missing out on so many venues for growth because our capital is bottlenecked by race and region. Research has shown that decreasing barriers faced by African Americans would produce substantial gains. This is why, even if you never apply for a loan from a community development financial institution, you should care about them. These institutions serve in places that the financial sector historically hasn't served well. And that lifts our whole economy up. By one measure, every dollar injected into a CDFI catalyzes $8 more in private sector investment. That means that today's announcement might lead to an additional $10 billion in investment. I know the President and the Vice President ran on a very ambitious agenda, Build Back Better, unwinding systemic racism, creating an economy that works for everyone. I believe this is what that looks like in practice. By channeling more capital into CDFIs, we're translating those ideals into reality. And this is just the beginning. The $12 billion Treasury is now allocating for community lenders is more funding than has flowed through the CDFI fund since its creation in the 90s. With that, I want to thank the entire CDFI team that's made today's announcement possible. And I want to echo the Vice President's thanks to all the members of Congress who helped get this done, including Senator Warner and Chairwoman Waters. And Madam Chair, let me now turn it over to you.